Welcome. Glad you could join us tonight. My name is Georgia Williams, and I would like to welcome you to the very last night of the Whitaker Library October Stories Night. All stories have been added to or will be added to the Whitaker Library YouTube channel. And tonight, I would like to welcome Booker Daniel. She's going to share some ghost stories with us from the local area. Thank you, Booker.
Thank you, Georgia. I'm so glad to have all of y'all with me tonight. I'm sometimes known as the Witch of Murfreesboro. I have a lot of competition in that, so I prefer to be known as the Keeper of the Stories because I think stories are important. And tonight I want to bring you a story about a gentleman who was affiliated somewhat with Chowan College, and he was very interesting and scary individual in life. He truly did live in Murfreesboro, and his plantation encompassed part of what is now Chowan's campus. His name was William Bartelle Wise. He was quite eccentric and is a very interesting story. He is buried not far from Chowan, in a little graveyard off of Woodridge Drive, and used to be a footbridge that went from the campus kind of behind the art building over to that graveyard. That has since been gone away since about the 1980s. So you don't have easy access over there. But if you're interested in following up on the story, you can visit the graveyard. But let me tell you a little more about Mr. Wise. He not only had a plantation, but some of his wealth came from dubious undertakings. He was a self-professed pirate. And one night when he was pirating, a big storm came up. There was a lot of wind, a lot of rain, and his ship started to sink. So he was scared, and naturally he called out to God for help. Well, the wind continued, the rain continued, the ship continued to sink, and he was very, very scared. So he decided he would call out to the devil since he got no help from God. And miraculously, a lifeboat appeared and he was saved. So from that moment on, he decided he had sold his soul to the devil. And he started obsessing about what would happen in his afterlife and planning on how he would cheat the devil. So he had his coffin made early, and it is said that he kept it in his barn at first, and he would often go and lay down in it to make sure that the fit was good. And I have also been told that he had an above ground sepulcher made. It's made of brick, and you can see it to this day, where his coffin would rest. I have been told that he had the coffin put in the sepulcher, and he would get in the coffin and let the stone be pulled across. I'm not so sure I believe that one, but I'm very claustrophobic, so I wouldn't want to believe that one. In any case, he made elaborate plans for his afterlife and his cheating of the devil. He wanted his best horse, his best hunting dog killed when he died, and he wanted them buried as well in the graveyard. He wanted to be buried with his pistol and his sword. His plan was, after he died, was to rise up, get his horse, his best hunting dog, and go hunting the devil. And he would tree the devil and kill him, and therefore rid the world of the devil. Now, I think the devil is still with us, so I'm not so sure that his plan was a very good one, but it was a very good story, and not just a story. My mother was a Chowan alum, class of 1936. And back in that time, there was a tradition that they would walk across that footbridge a lot and visit the graveyard. The graveyard at that time had a wrought iron fence around it. And she told me each corner had a witch's hat on it. Well, that scared me to death as a child because I thought, well, four witches must have gotten together to put their hats on the corner post. But what she really meant was the wrought iron fence. Each corner had a wrought iron conical shape on it, like a witch's hat. And I have read since I've grown up that he did that because his wife was extremely religious. And he was kind of doing that. He believed in the devil and believed that he had sold his soul to the devil. So he put the witches' hats on the fence to sort of thumb his nose at his poor wife. She's buried in the same graveyard. Also, outside the graveyard in my mother's time, she said you could see a depression outside the fence, a larger one and a smaller one. And that is where it was said that the horse and the dog were buried. Because back then they were considered not to have souls because they were animals and they were not allowed inside the graveyard fence. In any case, these stories persisted for many years, and many Chowan students would go to the grave, and it was a tradition that they would knock on Mr. Wise's grave and would ask him questions, and he supposedly answered. I've never tried that myself, but probably a lot of Chowan students did at the time. Now, he was never associated with the brown lady that we know of. He was born in 1790, and his gravestone says he died in 1860 or thereabouts. But there was a tradition at one time back in the 50s and 60s. I know they had the brown lady initiation that was sort of like a sorority initiation that was held inside. But the recipients didn't know that because they put a pillowcase over their head. In the 30s, they used to have what's called a brown lady day. They would pick one young lady to be the brown lady. She was very well thought of because she supposedly was very kind, very intelligent, and everyone loved her. She also, her favorite dress was that brown taffeta dress that rustled whenever she went up and down the hallway. So the first time that the brown lady was known to still be around, she would knock on the doors of the third floor of the Columns building where everyone was housed in the 1840s and 50s. And they would go to the door and nobody would be there. But jump forward about 100 years to the brown lady day, they would pick someone to be the brown lady representative, and they would process to the graveyard at night carrying candles and torches, and they would go in a circle around Mr. Wise's grave. Now, I always thought that was sort of an odd thing for a Baptist female college to be doing, but my mother did tell me that that was something that was done. And then later it went on to the sort of sorority type initiation. So if you go to the graveyard and you look at his grave, his gravestone says he was born in 1790, died in 1860 or thereabouts, and it has a very odd other in scripture on it. It says, "Hark, what yon tread do I hear? 'Tis death, eternity." So you can see he was very much worried about what his eternity would be. He had convinced himself he had sold his soul to the devil, but he also had this plan he was going to cheat the devil, and I'm just not so sure that that ever came about. He was not the nicest person. You can tell that because of the prank he played with the cemetery fence on his wife. Also being a pirate. It was said that when he would go lay down in his casket, he would get the slaves to put the top on. And it said when he really laid down in the grave, and he'd get the slaves to pull the slab over him. I'm still not really believing that one, but I wasn't there, so that could have been, and it makes for a good story. He was eccentric enough and odd enough, and also that could have been a way to keep his slaves in control by scaring them. Now, I might have had a different story. If I was them, I might have just pulled the top across and left him there, but in any way, he was an exceptional man, let's put it that way. And if you would like to visit his grave, you can go down High Street and turn on Woodridge Drive, go around the little traffic circle to your left, and when the road, Woodridge Drive, takes a sharp right, before it takes the left, you'll look over there and you'll see a fence, and in the back you'll see a tall monument. That is where his wife was buried. He is buried further next to the street. You'll see the brick sepulcher, and if you walk up there, you can read. It has his name and, of course, the inscription on it. Now, I would caution you, especially this time of year, it is on private property. I wouldn't want anybody to get caught for trespassing, but also this is the time of year at Halloween when the veil between the living and the dead is very, very thin. If you went this time of year in the dark, there's no telling. This is also 2020. This has been an odd year. Who knows what could happen? Mr. Wise could come through the veil and not be able to get back. I'm not sure we need him in 2020. Also, you could go through the veil to the land of the dead and not be able to get back either. Either one of those things, I don't think are things that I would want to happen. That's my tale about Mr. Wise. I'd be glad to entertain questions about any other Murfreesboro tales that you might know. Has anybody got a question?
Someone says in the chat that they enjoyed your story.
Hey, Booker, it's Al Parker. Can you hear me?
Hi, Al Parker.
Hey,
my
I just
favorite
wanted
graveyard pal.
I just want to tell you did a great job telling the story. I'm so glad Chowan is sharing this and archiving it on YouTube for future people to enjoy. So thank you. You did a great job.
Al, do you recognize my little friend in front of me?
I do. I do.
Anybody else have a question about any other Murfreesboro story? Well, Georgia, this was a great idea. I would be glad to do it again if y'all decide to do this again. So if we don't have any questions, if other people want other stories another time, tell them to make the request and we'll see what we can do.
Well, thank you so much. This has been very much a lot of fun getting everybody together during this week to hear the different stories. And we appreciate your time to put this one together. Thank you so
It
much.
really has been, and this was a really neat thing to do. And I was pleased to be asked. And like I said, I would be glad to participate again.
Thank you.
Thank you.